There are over 106 million Instagram posts that say hashtag blessed. Over 106 million. Now, many people, when they use hashtag blessed, they'll post a picture of them with a new car. I'm blessed. You're not. I'm bragging. Sometimes it's a picture of a vacation. Standing in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Maybe it's at Disneyland. Maybe it's at the beach. And it's hashtag blessed. Look where I am. Sometimes it's a picture of someone special in their life. A boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, a child. Hashtag blessed. And some people take fitness selfies of themselves, of their abs. Hashtag blessed. Which we really don't care about anyway. Hashtag the truth hurts. Okay, so all the pictures are, for many, how they define blessing. And it has to do with what I get or where I am. But biblically speaking, the word blessed is so much more than that. Biblically speaking, the word blessed has more to do with my character, the inside me, the real me, than with my circumstances, with my social media posts, with my edited pictures of my life. The real blessing God has for us is bigger, deeper, richer, fuller. Blessing from God's point of view is bigger and better than anything you could ever post on hashtag blessed. In order to live a blessed life, you and I have to become blessable. I have no doubt God wants to bless us. The question is, am I blessable? That is the question. Am I blessable? Welcome to part 8, the final message in our series. For the last 8 weekends, we have been talking about what's sometimes called the Beatitudes, which is the Latin word for blessings. And Jesus declares, makes 8 declarations, 8 pronouncements that it is God's will to bless us. He began his very first public sermon by saying, blessed, blessed are. But he not only shows us in his 8 statements that it's God's will to bless us, I believe in those 8 statements, Jesus is showing us God's ways of blessing us. The ways to be blessable. See, listen carefully. God can't bless every attitude and every action because some attitudes and actions aren't blessable. He wants us to position ourselves. We don't earn God's favor, but there are ways we position ourselves to experience the best that God has for us, the blessings that God has for us. And we've been talking about it for the last several weekends, and some of you have not missed one. I have been here for every one. Others of you, I know stuff happens and you had to go places, but let me just kind of recap where we have been in the statements that Jesus makes about how you and I position ourselves to be blessable. He begins by telling us that we become blessable when we admit our need for God. That's the gist of blessed are the poor in spirit. He's not just saying you're blessed if you're poor. No, you can be blessed poor, blessed rich. It's not the money I have or don't have. It's having Jesus Christ in my life. It's understanding that whatever riches I have are temporary anyway, but if I have Jesus, it's eternal. So blessed are the poor in spirit, those who recognize I need God in my life and admit it. They position themselves to be blessable. Jesus tells us that the blessable are those who choose to grieve over their losses and pains in life-changing ways. That's the beatitude. Blessed are those who mourn. You're like, what's the blessing about that? See, mourning is grieving is different. Everybody loses things. Everybody loses people. Everybody experiences loss in life. Everybody does. But not everybody processes their loss. That's what grieving is about. Grieving is about not getting stuck in my loss. Grieving is actually moving through my loss. The Bible says this about godly grieving or godly sorrow. It leads to repentance. That means it leads to a turnaround. It leads to a change. So when I mourn over who I am, what I've done, things that have happened, things I've lost, when I move through it in God's healthy way, it changes my life. I become blessable. Jesus also tells us we become blessable when our strength is under God's control. That's the gist of the beatitude. Blessed are the meek. Meek doesn't, I know it rhymes with weak, but meek has nothing to do with being weak. It has to do with God's controlling or directing the strengths of our life. God gives us strengths, and we surrender them back to God. He makes the most of them. Jesus also says we become blessable when we crave the very best. We talked about that. Have you ever had cravings and you just like you look for something? Jesus says those who crave God's rightness, hunger and thirst, not just for a taste, but for all the rightness of God they can get, to stand right with God, to stand right with themselves, to stand right with others, will experience God's blessing. He then talks about the fact that you and I are not only to crave righteousness, all that God has for us, when we feel another's pain in our heart and do something about it, we are blessed. Jesus says, blessed are the merciful. That's what the word means. To be merciful means I feel your pain in my heart. I don't just sympathize with you, I empathize with you. I feel it and then I act, I do what I can about it. The most merciful person there is God. God is the most merciful, and when you and I are merciful, we reflect Him. We are like Him when we feel others' pain, and we move to relieve it in whatever ways that we are able to. Then Jesus tells us we become blessable when we have a heart that's forgiven, undivided, and proactive. That's the gist of blessed are the pure in heart. The pure in heart doesn't mean that we're sinless, because nobody's sinless. We all mess up. And if you think you're sinless, there's your first one, okay? Like, because we've all goofed up many times. It doesn't mean I'm unblemished, like there's no flaws in my life. Everybody's got issues that they struggle with. It just means my heart is undivided. It doesn't mean that I'm passive. All right, God, I'll just sit back and do whatever you're going to do. No, I partner with God. He works on the inside, I work on the outside. He gives His best, I give my best. And Jesus says that's how we are blessed, when we have a pure heart. And then we talked about last time together, we live a God-ordered life, upward, inward, outward, which is the gist of blessed are the peacemakers. Godly peace is divine order in every direction of our life. And those who have peace with God, have divine order with God and with themselves and with others, they're like God and do God-like work. Now this weekend, our last weekend in our series, we come to the last blessing that Jesus declares. Now I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to guess that nobody, like in the last service, no one had. Maybe someone might have in this service. But I'm going to guess that the majority of us have not memorized this one. Like this is not people's favorite beatitude. It's one of the longest ones. But I want us to read it together, okay? It's in your notes. It's on the screens, in your Bibles. Let's read it. Matthew 5, verse 10. With our voices out loud, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. All right, now who's memorized this one before? Yeah, like, don't lie, you're in church, okay? Now not only have most of us, we've not memorized this one, we don't even really like this one. Let me tell you something about this blessing, this beatitude. It is, of the 8 beatitudes Jesus gave, 8 blessings, what I believe is the most personal and the most difficult. In some level. Let me explain what I mean. When I say it's the most personal, you'll discover, if you reread it and you circle, you'll find that 6 times in these verses, Jesus says you or your. 6 times. In all the other 7 beatitudes, not one time does he say you or your. He says they, those, them, groups, categories. But it's not personal. This one is very personal. You, yours. Now, one of the reasons I believe it's so personal is because harassment, persecution is very personal. Insulting us, lying about us. Come on, have you ever had someone say, like don't take this personally? And you go like, hold it. If you're talking to me, I take it personally. And someone accuses you, it is very personal. It hits home. It's hard not to take insults, lies, accusations, harassment personally. So it is very personal on that level. I believe it's also very difficult because it's hard to be the target of harassment. It's hard to be the target of rejection. See, there's been studies done, amazing studies, that rejection hurts sometimes more deeply than physical pain. They have tested that. They have done studies, and they set up people to be rejected, and they do all these and it hurt more than being physically poked in the eye when they were rejection is one of the greatest pains because we're meant to be connected. And part of this harassment is the rejection that is so difficult to deal with when we are the targets of somebody's hostility, anger, insults, lies, persecution. And so this is the most personal and the most difficult. But Jesus doesn't kind of leave us on this depressing note because we're like, yeah, I'm glad I showed up this week. But he doesn't stop there. After having told them this, that you will have people lie about you and attack you for no reason and say things about you, after he says you will go through this, then he says, look, verse 12, rejoice. Rejoice and you're like, hold on, rejoice, he says. Why? Because great is there's a reward, not just a reward, there is a great reward for you. And you're in great company because the prophets, great people in the past, they went through the same thing you're going through. See, Jesus doesn't say, listen, you're gonna go through it, good luck. Hope to see you on the other side. No, that's not what he says. He says, you're gonna experience things. And because you belong to me and you commit to me and I'm committed to you, there are gonna be rewards for your life that are on levels you can't imagine. You're on a team like you can't imagine. He gives us hope when you and I face harassment in life. And I want to share with you just for a couple of moments, I want you to write these things down, 3 very important principles and practices about how you and I can experience hope when we are harassed. When harassment happens in our life because we love Jesus, because we belong to Jesus, because we're following Jesus, I want to give you 3 things to write down. Let's jump right into it. Here's the first one in your notes. Please write this. The blessable will be harassed. I want you to write the words will be. Now some of you are going like, okay, hold on, I don't see where the hope is in this. No, you will. Have you heard the old phrase, to be forewarned is to be forearmed? Ever heard that phrase? It comes from centuries ago, and the gist is you're warned about a battle, and so you arm yourself. To be forewarned about a conflict, forewarned about a problem, forewarned about something, you can get ready for it. All right, let me try another one because some of you don't seem to remember that one. Let me try another one. Have you ever been flying? And all of a sudden, ding, 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 and you see the light, and it's a seatbelt light, and then the pilot comes on and says, we have some turbulence ahead of us. Please return to your seat. Please put on your seatbelt. I'm going to ask the flight attendants to please be seated because we're going to experience some choppy air. What's he doing? What's she doing? The pilot is forewarning us. Put on your seatbelt because it's about to get bumpy. Now, how many of you are glad they warn you? You'd rather have that than be in the aisle with your cup and you're flying around the airplane, inside the airplane while it's flying outside. No. You want to sit down. Thanks for the heads up. It's good news when you tell me to sit down before I fly around, okay? So that's exactly what I believe Jesus is doing. If you go back through the Beatitude, he doesn't say if you are harassed or if you are persecuted. He says when. See, it's not a chance, it's a certainty. Jesus says something very similar to his disciples the night before he was crucified. Watch this. Jesus says to them as he gathers them together, John 15, verse 19, if you lived on the world's terms, the world would love you as one of its own. But since I picked you to live on God's terms and no longer on the world's terms, the world is going to what? It will hate you. When, don't miss that word, not if. When that happens, remember this. Servants don't get better treatment than their masters. If they beat on me, they will certainly beat on you. He is giving them forewarning. He's saying, buckle your seatbelts. He continues. It's like, Jesus, this is not like a one-off message. He continues it. Watch chapter 16, verse 1. I've told you these things to, don't miss this, prepare you for rough times ahead. Ding, ding, ding. Rough air ahead. Turbulence ahead. They're going to throw you out of the meeting places. There'll even come a time when anyone who kills you will think he's doing God a favor. We're like, whoa. Verse 4. I've told you these things so that when the time comes and they start it on you, you will be well, what? Warned. And what? Ready for them. See, to tell someone there's turbulence ahead, there's tough times ahead, you will experience tough times. You will experience things that are very difficult to deal with. That prepares us because nothing kind of shakes us, rattles us, causes us to give up more than unrealistic expectations. Like I don't know if any of you, and if anybody told you accept Jesus and all your problems are over, they didn't tell you the right thing. Okay, like a lot of your problems are over. But how many of you, when you accepted Jesus, you got a whole new set of problems you didn't used to have before? Like your vocabulary. You used to say anything you wanted, and now you're like, I probably shouldn't say that. All kinds of things happened. Things you once didn't think twice about, and now you think a lot about. And all of a sudden, there's new challenges and difficulties that you never faced before. You're free of some of the old ones, but you got a bunch of new ones. And if you don't have that understanding that that as a follower of Jesus Christ, you're on his side and his team, and there's a whole new playbook and life way to live, you'll get discouraged when the rough times come. In fact, Peter, who experienced it, and he watched Jesus, and he went through it, and when the disciples experienced being thrown in jail, and then they got released, they rejoiced because they were on God's side. Peter writes to a group of believers who were really going through it, many being put to death, and he writes this in 1 Peter 4, verse 12. Dear friends, don't be surprised or shocked that you're going through testing. Like walking through fire. Be glad for the chance to suffer as Christ suffered. We're like, hold it. It'll prepare you, he says, for even greater what? Happiness. When he makes his glorious return. Count it a blessing. Jesus said, blessed are you when you suffer, when you're persecuted. Count it a blessing when you suffer for being a Christian. And I love this line. This shows that God's glorious spirit is where? Now I'll say it again. God's glorious spirit is where? So when I'm going through it, God has not abandoned me. Going through turbulence is not a sign or an indicator that God left me. It shows me that he is in me, that he is with me. It's a whole different frame of mind, a whole different way of expectation that you and I have as a believer. Now, let me help you with this and how Jesus said it's not a chance, it's a certainty. There's a secular organization called the International Society for Human Rights. And I call them a secular, I tell you that because this is not a religious organization, this is not a Christian group. And they report on human rights violations. And in their most recent report, they share that 85% of all the human rights violations around the world are focused on one people group. That right now in the world, in the entire world, when they study the attacks, the violations of people's rights, there's one group of people that are being attacked 85% of the time. And well, who do you think it might be? Let me tell you, our media doesn't tell us because it's not their group. It is Christians. A non-Christian secular group says the one group that is targeted around the world 85% of the time today are believers. Let me just show you a little bit of this war on Christianity and Christians. Here's the first slide. This is happening around the world. We don't hear about this. There are over 200 million Christians, 5 times the population of California, that right now are experiencing amazing harassment, persecution. Here's a second slide. Watch this. Every 6 minutes, a Christian is killed for their faith. Every 6 minutes. There have been martyrs since Jesus died for us. There have been martyrs. Stephen was martyred. There have been more Christians put to death for their faith in the 20th and 21st century than in all the centuries before that. It has increased in a number that is unprecedented. You see, every month, 214 churches and properties are destroyed. I have missionaries, I have friends, pastors, pastor in Sri Lanka, Pastor Deshaun, who sent me the pictures of the destruction of the churches that he oversees and pastors that happened right at Easter last year. I receive videos from our missionaries and pastors around the world on a regular basis of things that we never hear about, we never see. More Christians have been martyred for their faith. Over 75% of the world's population lives in areas with severe religious restriction. Next slide. In the Middle East, the number of Christians has decreased dramatically from 20% to 3%. With the attacks that are taking place, Iran, Iraq, Syria. In fact, over 50,000 to 70,000 are being held and tortured in North Korea. It's hard to get exact numbers because of the secrecy of the society. But it is amazing what is happening to believers in North Korea. Let me show you the next. In Syria, you hear about all the horrible things that have been happening in Syria for the last several years. Before this whole outbreak in Syria happened, there were approximately 1.1 million Christians that lived in Syria. Today, there are less than 600,000. Half have either been killed or fled. Half the Christians in the entire nation. Same thing has happened throughout Iran and Iraq. It is absolutely unprecedented what has happened to the believers in some of these places that were at one point, they were like a hub, a center of Christianity. And it has been, we don't hear this, but it's happening every single day around the world. Now let's bring it closer to home for just a moment. As Americans, let's speak for us, we don't get out of persecution, but persecution for the most part in America is more about the pressure to conform than physical violence, than physical attacks, though that is changing. It is changing drastically. It's changing quickly. The attacks on us for the most part are pressure to conform to a mentality, to an idea, to a philosophy. You've got to accept this. You are not allowed to have a different point of view or belief system. You must have ours or we will punish you economically. We will punish you in whatever way we can. But it's even going beyond just economic punishment. Listen carefully to candidates for positions. If you don't believe what I believe, we will take away your nonprofit status, we'll take away this, we'll take away that. What's that all about? Conform. See, you can't have a different opinion. You must share my opinion. You must share my view of truth. And it's become not just intellectual, political, it's become physical. Just ask a man by the name of Jack Phillips. You may have read of him, watched him. He's a baker in Colorado who has been for years repeatedly sued, death threats, attacked because he would not decorate cakes in ways that violated his belief system and his values. Now, he has made clear, his lawyers made clear, he has said over and over, I will serve anyone, any day, anytime. They can come into my bakery, I will serve anyone. Doesn't matter who they are, what they believe. But I won't make a message on something that violates my personal faith. I can't do that. I'll serve you anything, anytime, but I won't write something, I won't make something custom that violates my faith. And he was attacked for that, big time. Tried to destroy him for that, drive him out of business. Went to the Supreme Court and he won. That they cannot force you to do something that is totally against. You're not saying you can't eat. They can't make you write something that you do not believe. But he's still being harassed and in just unprecedented ways. I take you to what happened this month, earlier this month. There was a tragedy that happened on multiple levels, a tragedy that happened in Houston. There was a police officer that got off work and went home after a long shift. She went to her apartment and walked into the wrong apartment, not hers, but a wrong apartment, saw a man in what she thought was her apartment, and she shot him and she killed him. She was tried for it. She was convicted of murder. It wasn't reasonable grounds for what she did, and she was tried and she was convicted, and it was a big thing. It was in Houston. There's a Christian judge named Tammy Kemper. She was the judge over that trial. And at the sentencing part of that trial, she did something that has brought great criticism to her. What happened during the sentencing of that trial, because Amber had been convicted and had been sentenced, but the sentencing trials where they have people can speak and then they give them the sentence. Well, the brother of the man who was killed wanted to speak. It's on video. I just don't have time to show it to you. It is worth watching. It's incredibly powerful. He's an 18-year-old. His name is Brant Jean. He's the youngest brother of the murder victim, Botham Jean. And one of the things he said on the witness stand, because people can speak about the person before they are sentenced, he said the following. He said to Amber, I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that Botham would want you to do. Botham was a worship leader in his church. His family, it's still so devastating for them. And then Brant asked Judge Tammy Kemp for something that was just so unprecedented. After he gave his words and said, you need to accept Jesus, he said to the judge, could I please hug her? Like, that's just not, you don't hug the person that killed your family member. And the judge permitted it. He walked off the stand and she left her place at the table and they embraced in the middle of the courtroom and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbing could be heard in the court. Even in the video, you'll watch the judge wipes tears out of her eyes because you just don't do that. But a believer did that, and they wept. And she was seated, the trial, the sentencing completed. At the end of that time, Amber says to Judge Kemp, could I have a hug from you? And so this judge hugged this sentenced murderer, and then she did something else. She gave her her Bible, her own personal Bible. Now, again, we're in church, so we're like, yes. Somebody shares with a murderer that Jesus can save her. A judge steps in and gives her a Bible, but not everybody applauded. Many people attacked. Inside that courtroom, there were tears. Outside that courtroom, there were protests. They attacked the judge, tried to go after her. And finally, she spoke up, and she spoke to the Associated Press, again, not a Christian organization. And here's what Judge Tammy Kemp said to them, quote, following my own convictions, I could not refuse that woman a hug. If you profess Christian beliefs and you're going to follow them, I would hope they not be situational and limited to one race only. I saw someone who might seek God's forgiveness if she knew where to start, if she had a Bible of her own. She asked me if I thought that God could forgive her, and I said, yes, God can forgive you and has. I didn't want her to go back to the jail and sink into doubt and self-pity and become bitter. Because she still has a lot of life ahead of her following her sentence, and I would hope that she could live it purposefully, I gave her my personal Bible. I have several others. Here's a picture. This is the moment where an African-American judge, African-American victim, family, hands a former police officer of a different race, hands her her Bible, and she's opening it. This is the literal text that's underneath this from the Dallas Morning News. She's finding John 3:16. She wants her to know that God so loved that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting. And she wants her to know where it is, so she's finding it for her. And the reason she did this again, and see, you don't hear this in the news unless you dig into it, was that Amber said to her, can God really forgive me? This 18-year-old just told me that I need to accept you. Can God really forgive me for what I've done? Now, I share this with you again. And I don't have to do a lot of this stuff with the news and connect things, but I share this with you because I want you to know that you can do the right thing and not everybody will applaud you. And that is the right thing. Now, not in the world's point of view. See, in the world's point of view, it is not. And they hate that. How dare you? But the judge said, this is who I am. And these are my convictions. Let me tell you, it's very personal and it's very hard to deal with that. And some of you deal with it at work, and some of you will deal with that at home, and some of you will deal with that in communities in which you live. And it's hard to be rejected. It's hard to be attacked. We love approval and we love to be accepted. That's how we're wired and made. But it won't always happen because there's light and there's dark. There's God's love and there's those who want to hate it and those who follow it. And so you got to understand that Jesus said it will happen. So if you expect the turbulence, you will fasten your seatbelt. Now, Jesus also, let me get a quick qualifier because Jesus qualified it. He didn't just say, you're blessed if you suffer. He said, you're blessed if you suffer for me. Okay, I mean, you know that there's you can suffer for Jesus or suffer for our own stupidity. Okay, how many of you know that those aren't the same thing? Right? Okay, Peter wanted to make sure his church got that. This church gets this. Watch, 1 Peter 4, verse 15. If you suffer, however, it must not be for murder, stealing, making trouble, say this part out loud, or prying into other people's affairs, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Ooh. See, listen. He's saying, don't do stupid things and say, I'm suffering for Jesus. No, you're not. You're suffering for you. Okay, come on. Some Christians, don't use a lot of wisdom and judgment, and then they get, well, let me just show you what I mean. Watch the screens.
Hey, what are you doing? Oh, burying your cat, Mr. Bootsy. I loved Mr. Bootsy. I guess you love Mr. Bootsy too, huh? Because he's your cat? Well, was your cat? Hey, I got an idea. Why don't you come to church with me? Because all cats go to heaven, and if you go to church with me, you can find out what happened to Mr. Bootsy.
I don't think that's the way it works.
Yeah, I think it is. No, that's accurate.
I don't think it is.
That's what happens.
I don't think it does.
All cats go to heaven.
It's not the way it works.
Are you calling me a liar? So do you want to go to church with me?
Okay, don't do it like that, okay? See, if your neighbor chases you with a shovel because you're obnoxious, don't blame Jesus. Okay, that's not what Jesus is saying. I went to a conference one time. You pay really good money, and the guy gave us a basic principle for a great life. Don't do stupid things, he said. Okay, that's a good point. So Jesus is not saying, blessed are you because you mess up and do something stupid. No, he's saying, you're blessed if what you go through is because you love me and because you're following me. And the first way you have hope in the face of harassment is you buckle your seatbelt, is you understand, I'm not an exception. This is not an exception to the rule. It's not if it happens, it's when it happens. Because it will happen on some level at some time in every believer's life. And if it doesn't, you got to say, do they know I'm a believer? Do they know what I believe? Do they know what I stand for? I heard a question years ago that was just like a really stop in your tracks question. And it was simply this: if you got arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? If there is, you'll be harassed. Here's a second truth I want you to write in your notes. Here's a second principle and practice. The blessable respond in right ways to harassment. I want you to write the words right ways. Every believer will be harassed on some level at some time. And the question is not will I be harassed? The question is how will I react or how will I respond? And here's what Scripture teaches us to do. I want you to write two things down. These are two right ways. There are others, but let me give you two right ways to respond. Here's the first. When harassed, we need to follow Jesus' example. The word I want you to write is example, and it comes right out of what the Apostle Peter writes. 1 Peter 2, verse 21, Christ suffered for you, leaving you an what? Example. There, circle the word example. That you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, exactly what he talked about in the Beatitude, he did not retaliate, he didn't get even. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, there's another word I want you to circle, entrusted himself. Entrusted himself to him who judges justly. Now, what's really interesting, the two words I want you to circle is example and entrusted. The word example comes from like school days. It reminds me of when I was in elementary. Now, that's like a long time ago. Like I think dinosaurs were still roaming the earth. But how many of you remember, and this is, if you raise your hand, this makes you old. How many remember in school, in elementary, having tracing paper? Anybody ever have tracing paper? Yeah. Do they still use that? Okay, like tracing paper. It's like this thin paper, and you would put it over, people put it up on the window. We put it on the window, you tape it on the window, and you put the tracing paper over a pattern. That's the exact word Peter uses. The exact word he uses is that Jesus is our example. Follow the pattern. Follow his step. He uses the word pattern. He gives us a pattern. Follow it. So here's what he's saying. Jesus said, do what I did. Do what I did. Do how I handled it. How did he handle it? First of all, he did not retaliate. He didn't try to get even. Now, how many know he could have? Like, he could have gotten way beyond even. He's God. When Peter wants to try to defend Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he pulls out the sword and cuts off Malchus, the servant's ear. Like, he wasn't going for his ear, he's going for his head. He just wasn't any good with his sword. He's used to cleaning fish, not cutting people up. And so he cuts off an ear, and Jesus heals the ears, says, put it away, because this is not how this battle is going to be won. Don't you know that if I wanted to escape this, I could call for angels? It'd be over in a moment. But it's not how this is done. And he didn't retaliate. He didn't get even. It is so important to understand that. See, there are chances you and I could get even, but Jesus did not retaliate. He didn't try to get even, but he entrusted himself. That's the second word, to the one who judges justly. Here's the gist. The Bible tells us that you and I are to make judgments every single day. And when you hear someone tell you who really doesn't know much about Scripture, the Bible, they say, the Bible says don't judge or you'll be judged. It's like, it's not really what it says. It doesn't say you're not to make judgments. You're to make judgments every single day. You better make judgments about right or wrong. You better make judgments about people. How many know there are safe people and there are unsafe people? You better make judgments. You better teach your children to make judgments. Jesus said, by their fruit you will know them. Inspect the tree. Be fruit inspectors. So what does the Bible say and mean by don't judge? It means don't pronounce sentence. It means I can't condemn you. You know the phrase, people tell somebody to go to hell. What a statement. That's condemning somebody to a place they don't even know anything about. But that's the act of condemning. And Jesus says it's not your place, because there are things that only God knows and God can do. So you got to entrust it. It doesn't mean you do nothing. This is not fair. Oh, there's a lot of things that aren't fair. But you take all the unfairness, all the inequity, and you entrust it to God. God, you have the last word. And your last word is always the right word. You know better than anyone what's really going on. Now, let's just talk. It's just us. Let's talk for a moment. See, our problem is we think God might forgive him, and we want God to get him. And we want to be there. We want to see it when God gets him. And God goes, no, just slow down a little bit. And the Apostle Paul writes this, watch, in Romans 12, verse 19, don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging, the sentencing, says God. I'll take care of it. Trust God to take care of making it come out right. Our scriptures tell us that if you see your enemy hungry, go buy that person lunch. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. Your generosity will surprise him with goodness. Don't let evil get the best of you. Get the best of evil by doing good. If we had the time, some of you in this place could share story after story after story of somebody who was really evil to you. They harassed you, they attacked you unfairly, things they said about you, but because you didn't retaliate, later on they circled back to you like, why didn't you come back at me? Why didn't you attack me? Why didn't you? And you have overcome evil by not trying to get even, by trusting God. God's got the final word. God will handle it in ways that are the absolute best ways to be handled if I will follow the right ways that Jesus followed. If I will follow his example. Now let me give you a second way. Here's a second way. When harassed, we need to stand firm for Jesus. The words I want you to write are stand firm. And again, I take them right out of what Peter writes to his persecuted friends. 1 Peter 5:9, stand firm. Be strong in your faith, in your trust. Remember, your Christian brothers and sisters all over the world are going through the same kind of suffering you are. You're not unique. You're not the only one. You're not the only one going through this, so stand firm. The decision to stand firm, this is so important. Please, please, please dial in. The decision to stand firm is made before the test. It's very hard to make it in the test. You make up your mind before the turbulence hits, I'm going to buckle my seatbelt. Before this happens, when I hear about, I'm going to get ready. And when I know that harassment is going to happen in my life, I'm going to stand firm. You make up your mind. That's what Daniel did. In Daniel chapter 1, verse 8, Daniel and his friends are carried away to a foreign country, to Babylon, and it says this: Daniel determined that he would not defile himself by eating the king's food or wine. The gist is, before Daniel was ever tested, he made up his mind what he was going to do. How many have figured out that you can predetermine what you're going to do in certain situations? And so when the situation happens, you've already made up your mind. So I made up my mind, I'm going to be faithful to my wife. And so, like, if a situation comes up, I've already made up my mind. It's like, I'm not going there because I already made up my mind. So I already know what the answer is because I already made up my mind. I can make up my mind about situations that are going to happen in my life because you know they're going to happen. I can make up my mind before it happens, so when it happens, the test is, it's not easy, but I have already got my answer. Because I've made up my mind, I'm going to stand. And having done all to stand. That's what a believer in Rwanda did. A number of years ago, he was put on trial by his tribe for being a follower of Jesus. And they gave him the night and said, listen, the trial tomorrow is simply this: you renounce Jesus or you die. That's your choice. And that night in his room, he wrote something that has gone around the world. I want to share it with you. We'll put it on the screen so you can follow along and not just listen to me. You can watch. Here's the words. He wrote, I am a part of the fellowship of the unashamed. The die has been cast. I have stepped over the line. The decision has been made. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I won't look back, let up, slow down, back away, or be still. My past is redeemed. My present makes sense. My future is secure. I am finished and done with low living, sight walking, small planning, smooth knees, colorless dreams, chintzy giving, and dwarfed goals. I no longer need preeminence, prosperity, position, promotions, plaudits, or popularity. I now live by presence, lean by faith, love by patience, lift by prayer, and labor by power. My pace is set, my gait is fast, my goal is heaven, my road is narrow, my way is rough, my companions few, my guide reliable, my mission clear. I cannot be bought, compromised, deterred, lured away, turned back, deluded, or delayed. I will not flinch in the face of sacrifice, hesitate in the presence of adversity, negotiate at the table of the enemy, ponder at the pool of popularity, or meander in the maze of mediocrity. I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I must go until heaven returns, give until I drop, preach until all know, and work until he comes. And when he comes to get his own, he will have no problem recognizing me. My colors will be clear. Left it in his room. Next day, he's put on trial. He would not renounce Jesus, and he was martyred. The fellowship of the unashamed. And some of you, it's on the internet, you can find it, 1980. And it's gone around the world because he made up his mind that I'm going to stand for the one who stood for me. See, Jesus could have left the cross at any moment. It wasn't the nails that held him to the cross. It was his love. It was his choice. He stood for you and he stood for me. And if you're going to experience the blessing of harassment, you respond like he responded and you stand like he stood. And one more I want you to write. Here's a third key. The blessable are prize-focused when they're harassed. Not if, when. Again, Matthew 5:12, rejoice and be glad because great is your reward. Not just a regular reward, it's a great reward for standing. Listen, this is so important. People who endure the most and accomplish the most in any area of life are prize-focused. Let me say this again. I was thinking of remember, I'd like a Navy SEAL, and when you read his book and you read what Navy SEALs go through, you're like, they don't call it Hell Week for nothing. And that's only 1 week. The rest of the time is just as torturous. Like, why would anyone do that? Because there's a prize. The prize of being a SEAL, the prize of being one of the very, very few, the prize of, like in Remy's case, of being a defender of those who can't defend themselves. He had a prize in mind. When you look at somebody who excels in sports, they excel and they endure because they have a prize in mind. Doctors, lawyers, teachers, moms, dads. I'm telling you, anybody who endures and accomplishes only does it not because they enjoy the pain. If you enjoy the pain, you're not right. You're a masochist. That's not what it is. It's not the pain I enjoy, it's the prize that I'm going for. And that's the key for you and me, to be prize-focused. There's nothing immature or wrong about being prize-motivated. Paul was. Paul writes this, 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24, in a race, everyone runs, only one person gets the prize. So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away. There's earthly prizes that aren't worth it, but we do it for an eternal, what? Prize. Philippians 3, verse 14, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly, what? Prize. Heaven is not the prize. There are prizes you'll receive only in heaven, for which God through Christ is calling us to the prize. Jesus was prize-focused. I'll show you, watch. Hebrews 12:1, let us run with perseverance, endurance, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter, completer of our faith. Watch. Who for the joy set before him, that's the prize. See, there was a joy he was looking for, looking toward. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Why did he endure the cross? Because of something he was going for. Something he was looking at, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of God. He was finished. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners. He endured it. How? So that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Now, this is my opinion. I don't think anybody can say for sure. So what's the joy? I don't think it was heaven, because he'd already been in it. He's the only one who lived in heaven, came to earth, went back to heaven. So he wasn't running for heaven. He already had heaven. Some say he was running for the Father's well done, and that's very possible. The Father was pleased with Jesus. My opinion, the joy was you. The joy was me. What kept him on the cross was you. Because if he came down from the cross, he saved others, he cannot save himself. If he tried to save himself, he would not save others. They taunted him. You saved others, save yourself. He did not save himself because he couldn't save himself and he couldn't save us at the same time. So he saved us. See, that's why he stayed on the cross. Because his joy was you, living eternally with him, being forgiven of everything that destroys your life. And so, because he was focused on the joy set before him, he endured. Let me tell you what the prize is for us. The prize is Jesus. It's not, listen, it's not the crowns, and I can prove this. It's not the crowns. It's not the awards. And I'll tell you why. Because John says, when I saw in heaven, I saw people who had awards and prizes, and you know what they did with them? They threw them at Jesus' feet, because he's the prize. He's the prize. See, the prize is that I have something to give. When I was a kid growing up, there's a song that we would sing. It will be worth it all when we see Jesus. Because sometimes we have to remind ourselves of the prize. Life's trials will seem so small when we see Christ. One glimpse of his dear face, all sorrows will erase. So bravely run the race, and it takes being brave. Christianity is not for cowards. It takes courage to have conviction. So bravely run the race till we see Christ. The question is not, does God want to bless me? The question is, how blessable am I? In the 8 Beatitudes, Jesus shows us how to position ourselves to be blessed and to be a blessing. And the last one is the most personal and the most difficult. And it's about harassment and persecution. And Jesus says, I want you to have hope in the face of rough air, hassle, attacking times. And the first is know that it'll happen to you. The first key is just simply understand that the blessed will be harassed. So when it happens, you don't go, hey, what's happening to me? I'm out of step with God. No, God is with you. And he warns you so you can get ready. And he prepares you so you can buckle up. And when you get through this, you're going to be more than you've ever been before. To respond to the harassment in right ways is so vital. Peter says, trace what Jesus did. Trace his steps. Paul says, don't try to get even. When you love them back instead of trying to get even, people will be shocked because nobody acts like that on their team. But you're not on their team. You're on Jesus' team. And if it doesn't work out and they don't respond to you, trust God with it because he's the ultimate judge. And while you're going through it, those who endure the most and accomplish the most are prize-focused. So fix your eyes on Jesus. And know that your prize is one day you're going to stand in his presence. And it will be worth anything and everything you ever did to see him face to face. And you will be blessed. Let's pray. Thank you, Jesus, for not holding back on us. You never tried to sell us. You never lie to us. You never tell us that life's a piece of cake. You said in this world you will have trouble. But take heart. I've overcome that trouble. Every one of us will face harassment on some level, some form, at some time. I just pray that you would teach us how to experience the blessing, to be able to rejoice and be glad. And if you're here today and you've never accepted Jesus, see, that's the first way you start, by just saying, Jesus, forgive me of my sin. Be the leader of my life. I pray for others, Lord, who are going through it right now. There are people in their jobs, in their families, in various situations, and they feel so harassed. May they know that you've not left them. It's a sign that you are in them. And I pray you would give them the courage to stand and the faith to keep on holding on until they see you face to face.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's webcast. For the ultimate Sunday experience, join us Sundays at one of our 3 services, 9 a.m., 11 a.m., or 1 p.m. Have a blessed week. I'll see you next time.